The content, views, and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and do not necessarily reflect the view and opinions of the City of Bremerton, BCAT, their officials, or their employees.
Welcome back to the ADHD Historian, where we explore history with curiosity and depth. Today, we're diving into one of the most iconic events in American history, the Boston Tea Party. But this isn't just a story about tea and taxes. It's a story about the consequences of one war, the French and Indian War, laid the groundwork for another, the American Revolution. Let's unpack how it all connects. To understand the Boston Tea Party, we need to go back to the 1750s and the French and Indian War. This war, fought between Britain and France for control of the North, was costly, not just in lives, but in money. By the war's end, in 1763, Britain emerged victorious, but the costs were staggering. They were drowning in debt. To make matters worse, British government believed that the American colonies should help foot the bill. After all, the war had been fought in part to protect colonial interests. This thinking led to a series of taxes and laws imposed on the colonies, starting with the infamous Sugar Act and Stamp Act. And just like that, the seeds of colonial discontent were sown. Now let's fast forward to the 1770s. The British government, still grappling with the debt from the French and Indian War, decided to double down on taxing the colonies. Enter the tea tax of 1773. This act wasn't just about raising money, it was about bailing out the struggling British East Indian Company. Here's how it worked. The act allowed the East Indian Company to sell directly to the colonies, bypassing the colonial merchants. While this made tea cheaper, it also created a monopoly, cutting colony merchants out of the trade. The colonists saw this as another example of Britain's overreach and threat to their economic freedom. It's important to note that this wasn't just about tea. The colonists were frustrated by taxation without representation, and what they saw was systemic erosion of their rights. The Tea Act became a symbol of British tyranny. Now we arrive at the night of December 16th, 1773. In Boston, tensions were boiling over. A group of colonists calling themselves the Sons of Liberty decided to take action. Disguised as Mohawk warriors, a symbolic gesture meant to represent Native American identity, they boarded 3 British ships in the Boston Harbor. Over the course of several hours, they dumped 342 chests of tea in the harbor. That's about 90,000 pounds of tea, worth over $1 million in today's money. This act of defiance was a message to Britain. The colonies would not stand for unfair taxation or monopolies. But let's pause here for a moment. The Boston Tea Party wasn't a spontaneous act. It was the culmination of years of growing anger and frustration, much of which is traced back to the financial burdens faced after the French and Indian War. The war created the debt created the taxes, and the taxes fueled the revolutionary spirit. It's also worth noting the irony in the Sons of Liberty choices to dress as Mohawk warriors. While they appropriated indigenous imagery to symbolize rebellion, their struggle was far removed from the actual disenfranchisement faced by Native peoples. This act was more about using the idea of resistance than truly aligning themselves with indigenous struggles. It's a pattern we've seen throughout history, groups borrowing symbols of marginalized resistance while ignoring the realities of those they imitate. A modern parallel might be how some people compared wearing masks during COVID-19 to slavery, misusing historical narratives of real oppression to frame their own grievances. Both cases trivialize the true struggle of those who were and are systemically oppressed. The British government didn't take the Boston Tea Party lightly. In response, they passed the Coercive Acts, known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts. These laws were designed to punish Massachusetts and assert British authority. Among other things, the Intolerable Acts closed Boston's harbor until the tea was paid for, effectively crippling the colony's economy. They also placed Massachusetts under direct British control and allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in England. For the colonists, these acts were the final straw. Rather than breaking the colonies, the Intolerable Acts had the opposite effect. They united the colonies in opposition to Britain and led to the formation of the First Continental Congress in 1774. The path to the revolution was now inevitable. So, how does this all connect back to the French and Indian War? In a way, the French and Indian War just didn't set the stage for the Boston Tea Party. It set the stage for the entire American Revolution. The war left Britain with a financial crisis, which led to taxes, which led to protest, which led to the revolution. And there's an irony here that's hard to ignore. George Washington, whose actions during the French and Indian War helped ignite that conflict, later became the key leader in the fight against British taxes. It's a reminder that history isn't a straight line, it's a web of interconnected events and consequences. The Boston Tea Party is often celebrated as a bold act of defiance, and it was. But it's also a reminder that everything comes at a price. The tea dumped into the Boston Harbor was a protest against taxation. The taxes themselves were consequences of war, and the revolution that followed would come with its own cost, and lives and resources, and then the hard work of building a new nation. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you the next time on the ADHD Historian.